Do you know what the strongest weapon of the Imperium is? Against the countless legions of foes and threats that plague mankind, what weapon is it that we can rely on over every other? When your sword is broken and bent, when your bolter is empty and can't fire, when your allies have fallen out around you, when your armor is cracked and unmoving, when you can't radio for help or assistance, what weapon is left in the hands of man? Faith. Faith in the divinity of the God Emperor. Faith in the will of man. Faith in the future that the Master of Man has ordained for his children. Faith that the stars will one day belong to mankind. And that faith is the most powerful weapon mankind can wield against the darkness. And it is through faith that the will of man is allowed to survive and endure. And of all three primary military forces of the Imperium, neither the Astra Militarum or the Adeptus Sororitas can claim to wield faith as well or with as much devotion as the military arm of the ecclesiarchy itself, the Adeptus Sororitas, more commonly known as the Sisters of Battle. This all-female warrior force is more than just a military power, but they are also spiritual guides and ministers of the ecclesiarchy. These women battle against not just the Xenos and Chaos forces, but also against the doubts, paranoias, and sins that grasp and claw at the hearts of men. So mighty is their faith in the God Emperor that they can literally manifest this faith into the form of miracles in some cases. So devoted and devout are they to the Master of Mankind that it is next to impossible to corrupt a Sister of Battle. Indeed, it could be said that these nuns with guns are among the finest warriors the Imperium can offer, aside from the Astartes themselves. And I love them. Welcome, everyone, to Crash Course Warhammer, where my brother and I chat about Warhammer stuff and share our thoughts and outlooks on different aspects of the lore. And today I want to talk about my favorite faction in the lore, and the faction that I first started with the minis, as well as a somewhat underrated group in the community overall, the Adeptus Sororitas, or the Sisters of Battle. Now, my very first miniature army, like I said, was a Sisters of Battle army, and I've been reading their books for some time. I've been really getting into their lore. I would actually say that I enjoy reading the lore of the Sisters almost more than I do some Space Marines. Now, before we go further, let's go ahead and address this meme. Yes, I'm aware of the nuns with guns meme. I've heard a few people argue that the sisters are not actually that good in lore, but people think they are because they're just simps who just get off to women in power armor. And to that I have to say two things. Number one, if you don't simp just a little for women in power armor, then I'm sorry, we just can't be friends. I'm joking, of course. It's fine if you're not into it. It means more sisters for me. Number two, by the end of this video, I'm going to do all I can to break down why these ladies are incredible and do not deserve some of the hate they get. So, first up, for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, I mean, you're familiar with, the Space Marines and stuff. You got that pretty much down pat. What the heck's a Sister of Battle? Let's go into a little bit of history. The Sister of Battle did not form until sometime after the formation of the ecclesiarchy. So this is after the Horus Heresy. This is after the Emperor's on the Golden Throne. This is a little bit later, about midway through the existence of the Imperium in the galaxy, right? During a time known as the Age of Apostasy. At that time, the ecclesiarchy, which is basically the big church, had gained almost uncontrollable political power, and the head of the ecclesiarchy, Goj Van Dyer, had essentially gone mad with power and ambition. Now, it came to Van Dyer's attention about a cult of women called the Daughters of the Emperor, located on a planet called San Leor. These women were devoted solely to serving the Emperor and practicing of martial and military arts. Mostly detached and isolated from the rest of the Imperium, they were not aware of a lot of the technological and innovative things that the Imperium had at its disposal, which made them both a little bit out of touch with everything, but also incredibly gullible. Van Dyer saw potential, so he decided to manipulate these women into his service. He convinced them that he was divinely charged by the Emperor through a little deceptive manipulation and underhanded tactics through the use of his Rosarius, and thus the Daughters of the Emperor swore themselves to him immediately. They were renamed the Brides of the Emperor and became Van Dyer's most powerful and loyal soldiers, given top-rate armor, top-rate weapons, and top-rate positions. Now, we'll probably do a whole video on the Age of Apostasy and Van Dyer himself someday, but to make a long story short, Van Dyer got way too big for his britches and started doing abhorrent things, such as, virus bombing innocent worlds, abducting innocent children and girls from various worlds for reasons, attempting to brand several chapters of Astartes as heretics and limiting the strength of the Navy itself. This resulted in a conflict that led to an assault on the ecclesiarchical palace itself. However, To the surprise of the Astartes units involved in the conflict, the palace was staunchly protected by the brides of the Emperor. Oh well, no big deal, just a bunch of women in power armor, right? So you'd think. They proved themselves warrior of equal measure to the Space Marines. In fact, it turned into an absolute slaughter fest. Adorned in the finest power armor and given exceptional weapons, the brides were actually giving the Marines a challenge. Now, in the midst of this fighting, a custodes finally got involved and contacted the leader of the brides named Alicia Dominica and escorted her and her bodyguards to the Golden Throne Room to stand before the Emperor himself. Now, while we don't know what happened in that room, we do know that when they left, Alicia and her followers were now aware of the evil of Goj Van Dyer. They marched to his tower, broke open his door, and declared that he would face executions for his sins. To which Van Dyer famously replied, "I don't have time to die, I'm too busy." And then he died. Apparently he did have time. Or we made time for him. The brides, now called the daughters once more, were greatly shamed by the deception they had fallen for, and were prepared for any punishment the administratum or militarum saw fit. Luckily, though, the new ecclesiarch, Sebastian Thor, had a different idea for them. He instituted a decree passive, which declared that the ecclesiarchy could never again have, quote, men under arms to fight for them. No men? Huh, well, luckily there are no men in the Daughters of the Emperor. So they were renamed the Adeptus Sororitas, the all-women warriors that now had a new calling and purpose, to protect and fight for the ecclesiarchy and the needs of the Imperium. And that's pretty much how they got started. Now, the Sororitas hierarchy is actually very easy to understand once you understand the different levels. At the head of the Sororitas is the Abbess Sanctorum, who currently, in lore, is Morven Val. She is the absolute and unquestioned authority to the rest of her sisters, and though she's more of a political role technically rather than a military one, she still dons a special war suit and goes to battle when and where she can. What's really cool about Morven, and she deserves her own video, she really does, what's really cool about her is she is no pushover. Funny thing is, they tried to get her planted as the abbess because she was very, very young, and the High Lords of Terra thought that they could kind of manipulate her and use her. Nah, she ain't taking that shit. She actually stands up to them a lot of the time. Despite being unprecedentedly young to be abbess, she doesn't let the High Lords push her around, and she even earned the approval of Gilliman himself. Bruh. Anyway, below the abbess are the two prioresses in charge of the two major convents. They answer directly to the abbess and relay her decrees and commands. The convents are organized into several orders of sisters. Now, these orders can be seen in two different groups. The orders militant, composed of 6 majorist orders as well as minorist orders, and the orders non-militant. Now, most people don't think about the orders non-militant, and they are still trained as fighters, but the reason most people don't think about them is fighting isn't their primary function. The non-militant orders primarily are meant to assist with the work of the ecclesiarchy and imperium in other ways. For example, you have the orders hospitaller, who are composed of surgeons, doctors, nurses, physicians, and they provide first aid and healing on battlefields and in hospitals and stuff like that. Many people are very happy to see an order hospitaller because you know they're actually going to give a damn about you. Then you have the orders dialogus. They deal in languages, translations, interpretation of scripture, cipher work. They're the ones who are, interpreting documents, giving sermons, reading lectures, stuff like that. Then you have the orders familius, who are diplomats and advisors to the planetary governors, as well as chamberlains and confidants. And then you have the orders Sabine, who act as missionaries going to rediscovered human territories and bringing the light and truth of the emperor to the masses, ensuring that they will be compliant, and if they won't be, get them purged. There are many, many non-militant orders, and all serve very important purposes to be sure, but they simply aren't the orders most people know of. That would be the orders militant. Now, before we get into the orders militant and which ones they are specifically, let's get back to the order structure. Each order is structured the same way. The order is run by the canoness superior. But under her are several preceptors or subsidiary convents of up to about 1,000 sisters who are run by a canoness preceptor. Under the preceptors might be several commanderies made up of around 200 sisters run by a canoness commander. And then finally you may have a mission, which is made up of only a few units of sisters and led by a canoness or palatine. So like I said, pretty cool stuff, pretty easy to understand once you get down to it. But now let's talk about the 6 orders majoris and the countless orders minoris. We can't go into all the orders minoris because there are so many, you count them all. You know how you can make your own homebrew Space Marine chapters? Same with the countless orders minoris. You can make your own minoris order. I've made my own minoris order called the Sisters of the Sacred Spear, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the orders majoris, the 6 primary orders majoris that were based on and honored after Alicia Dominica and her 5 personal guards. We can focus on each individual order in their own video maybe, but for now, you can know the basics. So let's go through all 6 of them. First, you got the Order of Our Martyred Lady. These are your stereotypical sisters. They're the most recognized, they're the most popularized, they're the ones you see all over the place. They're noted for dyeing their hair white, wearing black and white armor with red cloaks. They're the largest and most prominent of the Orders Majoris. Originally, they were known as the Order of the Fiery Heart, but when their matriarch, Sister Catherine, died, they were so moved by her death that they changed their name to reflect their devotion to her. They are renowned for their determination and martyrdom. This order takes martyrdom and self-sacrifice to an almost unprecedented level, in fact, gladly throwing their lives away to serve a higher purpose. You might think they had a death wish, but don't let that fool you. They are aggressive and ferocious in battle, and they have more than earned their reputation as warriors. Second is the Order of the Valorous Heart. These sisters still haven't fully forgiven themselves for the actions of the sisterhood during the time of Goj Van Dyer, and thus they are far more self-flagellating than others. These sisters believe that pain is the way to salvation. You have to go through hardship, pain, and difficulty, and these sisters, you might call them a little masochistic. In fact, many join the sisters' repentia out of just a desire to repent for their perceived sins. Their method of war is also unique among their fellow orders. They will purposefully target enemy supply points and areas of retreat, then box in their targets, and then engage in a long battle of attrition, which they will prove themselves more than capable of winning. Third is the Order of the Bloody Rose. Okay, the Bloody Rose is the easiest order to understand. First, imagine a cornate berserker. Now make them a woman. Now make them loyal to the Emperor. There you go. That's the Order of the Bloody Rose. These women, adorned in red, are trained from the start to hate. Hate the enemies of mankind, hate the enemies of the Emperor, hate the Xeno, hate the heretic, hate the mutant, hate the witch, hate the demon. They are ingrained with a focused rage and hate for heresy and enemies, but do not confuse it for mad mindlessness. It is their belief that controlled rage is the way to victory, while losing one's control is equitable to a sin. These ladies will use disciplined maneuvers to manipulate their foes into overcommitting to a specific spot, and then engage in bloody, furious melee, bathing in the blood of their enemies and screaming blood for the golden throne, skulls for the Emperor. No, they don't do that? Okay. I thought they might, but they don't. Fourth is the Order of the Ebon Chalice. Now, these ladies have a superiority complex that acts something of a detriment. Founded by the original leader, Alicia Dominica, they wear the same battle colors and standards as the original daughters of the Emperor. They hold loyalty, duty, and devotion most sacred, and rather than travel the galaxy to fight battles, they tend to stay close to Terra and Segmentum Solar, where they guard the heart of humanity. Because they feel their order standards are so important, though, it is difficult for the new women coming in to try to join up and meet the cut. Thus, their numbers are always below par. The Ebon Chalice order is the one that is usually the smallest of all the rest, but as a result, they are the elites. They are the best. You cannot find better sisters than these in terms of just overall discipline, loyalty, and commandery. Fifth is the Order of the Sacred Rose. Okay, do you remember how earlier I said the sisters can actually cause miracles with their faith? That's these ladies. The Order of the Sacred Rose believe that it is not enough to show physical strength, but strength of faith. They aren't just his warriors. They fight with the will of the Emperor. They fight with sound and unshakable battle discipline, and at times their faith can manifest itself in the form of miracles, such as seeing their foes suddenly combust into fire, or they may suddenly gain supernatural bursts of speed without warning. Their faith is so strong they have taken to fighting for worlds and territories once thought lost entirely, and they've won back quite a few. And finally, my favorite, the Order of the Ardent Shroud. These women believe that actions speak louder than words. Literally. They're highly altruistic and believe in silent but devout heroism. The Ardent Shroud will often keep quiet and communicate only in soft, hushed tones between their trusted sisters. And when battle comes, they'll employ lightning-fast assault and maneuverability to their advantage, using jump pack-equipped Seraphim and Zephyrim to destroy artillery and destroy command structures, and then sending in Dominion squads to slaughter entire fortresses. The problem is, this often puts them in vulnerable positions. But luckily, they're prepared for this. The Ardent Shroud is known to cry out to their matriarch Sylvana for protection, and this somehow works, as quite often the shots and strikes of their enemies seem to miss. When a sister of the Ardent Shroud does die, it's usually in defense of another in an altruistic act of self-sacrifice. Now you might think, isn't that like the Order of Our Martyred Lady? Here's the difference. The Order of Our Martyred Lady believe that martyrdom reflects their devotion to Catherine because she herself was a martyr. Meanwhile, the Orders of the Ardent Shroud do it because usually they believe that altruism is the way to protect others. That's kind of why I like them. They're a little different in that regard. Now, I know what some of you were thinking after going over all that, because I've heard a lot of people say it before. You know, There doesn't seem anything that special about the sisters. You could just shove an Imperial Guard regiment in the same power armor, and you'd get even better soldiers because men are naturally stronger. Well, here's where you'd be wrong. The sisters only wear their power armor because it allows them to fight better, but they'd gladly run into battle naked if they could, because the sisters believe firmly that their faith is their shield. In fact, the Sisters Repentia are an organization made up of sisters working to atone for their sins, and they aren't allowed to wear any armor and must fight in melee against their enemies. And that leads to the first thing that makes these ladies so damn incredible. Their faith isn't just a platitude. It has power. The sisters have such faith in the Emperor they can manifest miracles. They can alter the fate of others around them and even impact their own survivability in some cases. Take Ephriel Stern, a sister who was forced to accept the combined faith of 60 other sisters who had been tortured to death by Tzeentch, and has managed to manifest that abundance of faith into literal sorcery that rivals Mephiston himself. She's able to duel great unclean ones and giant demon engines single-handedly, wielding lightning, fire, and even able to fly. She's currently pissing off the Necrons in Pariah Nexus because her faith isn't warp-born, meaning she's immune to the nullifying effects of the Nexus. Yeah, the Necrons do not like her one bit. The second thing that's so incredible about the sisters is the fact that they can and do form attachments and connections to their fellow man. As amazing as the Astartes are, and they are amazing, the vast majority recognize their superiority to the average human, unless they sometimes have an aloof or distant relationship with humanity. Now, that's not to say that they don't care about humanity. Many do, but they're always going to have this sense of, we're better than you, because we've been made better. The sisters, meanwhile, live amongst humans and work to the betterment of their salvation. Sororitas are often called upon to oversee sermons, provide guidance, and do far more than just point bolters and swing chainswords. If I were to put it in a single sentence, Sororitas serve mankind, not just engage in war. The third thing that's incredible about the sisters is that they are incorruptible. While every other faction in the Imperium has shown that they can fall or waver in their faith at some point, the sisters almost never break. For them, if the war is going well, that means the Emperor's on their side. If the war isn't going well, they have failed somehow and must fight harder to atone for it. And if they die, then it means they fulfilled their duty and will now go to the Emperor. There are only 3 instances in lore of a sororitas turning to chaos. One instance we can't even really count because those sisters weren't actually turned, but brainwashed by warp hypnosis. The other was a sister named Miriel Sabathiel, I think I mispronounced that, I'm even looking at the name and I can barely pronounce it, who was tortured and broken to serve Slaanesh. And then there was an Arcs of Omen where Khorne had to personally get involved and use a murder curse to turn several loyalist forces to his will. But as Pancreas No Work put it, if the Chaos Gods themselves have to get involved personally to corrupt you, you're pretty incorruptible. The fourth thing that's incredible about the sisters, yeah, I know, 4 things. Did you expect it? And perhaps this is the most important thing of all. They're human. Now you might think, what? What are you talking about, Raven? Think about it. They're not augmented. They're not mutated. They're not genetically enhanced. They are normal human women. Sure, highly trained, well-armed, and very faithful women, yes, but still normal human women. And yet these women have fought on par with actual Space Marines. Some of these sisters have actually killed Space Marines in single combat. What makes them so special to me is it's a reminder of something many in the Warhammer community forget. Humanity is not weak. I've heard some argue that if it weren't for the Space Marines, humanity wouldn't stand a chance in the galaxy. And I agree with this stance in its practicality, but it ignores an obvious counterpoint. Humanity could not survive without the Space Marines, true, but the Space Marines could not survive without humanity. Despite their strength and their augmentations, it is still the core will, strength, and faith of humanity that makes the Space Marines what they are, and the sisters are a prime example of that made manifest. If the Astra Militarum is an example of the strength of man, then the Sororitas are an example of the power of faith. And it is powerful. Now, before we go, I want to address some of the obvious criticisms that I'm going to get in the comments. So let's hit them up right now. But Raven, the sisters are only good because their power armor and weapons are there. Give them to any guard regiment and you get an even better fighting force. I know I brought this up earlier, but I want to also point this out. Why did Goj Van Dyer see anything useful in them? Why did Sebastian Thor keep them on retainer and not just assign a special Astartes chapter or guard regiment to the defense of the ecclesiarchy? I mean, they had the armor, they had the capability to make this armor and weaponry. If it really is just down to who's wearing the armor and weapons, and it has nothing to do with who's underneath, then you're right. All they need to do is just kick out the sisters, grab a really experienced guard regiment, shove them in that armor, and you got a better fighting force. So why not do that? You gotta remember that despite Goj Van Dyer being a lunatic and a wicked individual, he clearly saw potential in the sisters and wanted them for the Imperium. And Sebastian Thor, who is of much more level-headed mind, why didn't he get rid of the sisters after the war was over? Why didn't he say, you're all traitors, get rid of them, find us a good guard regiment to wear their armor instead? Why not? If the girls could so easily be replaced with men in similar armor, why didn't we just do away with that? There would be no need for the decree passive. Just say, from now on, the ecclesiarchy can only deploy this Astartes chapter or this Imperial Guard force in their defense. Clearly, the sisters had some capability that they didn't want to waste. Plus, did you miss the part earlier about them being incorruptible? Even the Astartes aren't 100% immune to corruption. With only 2 exceptions, the sisters have never fallen to corruption. That is worth something, bro. Plus, let's be 100% honest here. While it's easy to only think about the military aspects of the Warhammer universe, from a lore and structural perspective, the sisters are unique from Space Marines and Standard Guard regiments because they serve more purposes beyond just military engagements. The sisters non-militant serve mankind, not warfare, and that is an incredibly important distinction. Every Space Marine is a warrior who will fight and die in war, but most will never aid or partake in a standard need for humanity, the ecclesiarchy, or the running of the Imperium. They fulfill a vital role, but that is what they were designed to do. The sisters not only fight in war, but they do so much more than that, which makes them a versatile, complex, and fascinating faction. Only looking at them for their military capabilities limits your understanding of the sisters in a big way. The next thing some people will say, but Raven, the sisters are just zealous religious fanatics. The Emperor himself tried to do away with that stuff to prevent the worship of the Chaos Gods. You know, I find it hilarious that there's such a large number of folks out there who think this way, who love the Imperium almost solely because the Emperor wanted a secular humanity with no gods or religion, claiming it was the atheist perfection made realized, despite the fact that he was proven to be lying and there were gods and forces out there. Leaving that aside, I think that's why so many people don't like the sisters. I was going on a lot of Reddit posts and posts online about the sisters and why people didn't like them, and a lot of them came back to this point. They're religious fanatics, and they don't like that. Why? Because there are people out there who don't like that the sisters embody everything they hate about the Imperium. The idea that a bunch of religious warriors actually can use their faith and fight with it. Well, to that I say this: stand up for Jesus. And then the third one, but Raven, the sisters prevent the inclusion of female space marines. Actually, to be fair, I don't think anyone's actually going to type that in the comments, but I do want to address this point, because one of the reasons I think that the sisters get some hate is because they are the literal counterpoint. See, when someone says, I want female X, X being Space Marine or Custodes or something along those lines, the counterpoint is Sisters of Battle. The truth is, these people who say that don't actually want female X. They just want to push a DEI inclusivity and agenda, because the sisters' very existence blows their whole argument out of the water. It goes something like this. We need female Space Marines. Warhammer 40k needs female Space Marines. The obvious response is, why do we need them? Because it's just a sausage fest. There are no good women in the Imperium of Man. There are no good female characters. Now you go, the Sisters of Battle exist, and there are a lot of fascinating characters there, and thus their brains explode, because their whole thesis has just been shot out of the water. I think that's another reason to love them. Because, quite frankly, we have our awesome male Space Marines, but we also have our awesome lady warriors who are on par with the Space Marines. Yes, I know the Space Marines are technically stronger in a lot of areas, but the sisters have engaged and handled Space Marines before. It is not impossible. Anyway, I want to reiterate this because I think it bears repeating. I want to say this. The Adeptus Sororitas, I feel, are incredibly unique, fascinating, and frankly underrated as an overall faction. From Saint Celestine, the Living Saint, Ephriel Stern, the Daemonifuge, to Morven Val, the Abbess Sanctorum herself, there is fascination, intrigue, and depth to the Sororitas. They aren't just nuns with guns, though I know that's the appeal. They are far more than that. For me, it's a lot like when you look at knights in the Crusades. Yeah, they're awesome armor-clad warriors who kick all kinds of ass, but their faith and duty to the church is almost fundamental to what they are and why they fight. The sisters are the same way to me. Yeah, they look badass and they're super effective, but what makes them effective is their powerful faith and duty to the Emperor and humanity, something even many Space Marines cannot claim to embody. In fact, what makes me like the sisters more than Space Marines is the fact that they are, like I said, just humans. They aren't genetically enhanced or mutated, they are humans. Though wearing fine armor and using powerful weapons, yes, I agree, they are humans, powered by faith and divine zeal, and I have always found that badass. I absolutely love them. Now, sometime I may do a video on St. Celestine, on Ephriel Stern. Maybe I'll do a video on my own Maid Minoris order, the Order of the Sacred Spear. Or I could do a video talking about why the Ardent Shroud is my favorite, why I think the Order of our Martyred Lady is a little overrated among the Orders Majoris. There's a lot of things I could talk about with the Sisters of Battle, but I really wanted to make this video because I see so much hate for the Sororitas. I've seen videos and articles and little blurbs online of people just saying that they're either overrated, they're just nuns with guns, they're just sex appeal, there's nothing good about them. And I'm like, are you kidding? So I made this video to not only talk about why they're my favorite, but also to make you guys realize they're pretty damn awesome, and I think they kind of deserve their own game. Okay, I said it. I'd like a Space Marine 2 style game with the Sororitas in it. Come on, guys, it's begging for it. Wouldn't that be awesome? Anyway, I'll go ahead and call it there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.